what did you learn in Central America? Like, how does missions and what you experienced there? Because the big question we're trying to understand, this is like the code we're trying to crack. Why do disciples not multiply in the West? That's what I want to know. I want to understand why. So anything,
Uh,
any background, we can't get to the fourth generation no matter how hard we try. So please help me.
yeah.
Like, what did you see happening in Central America? And then we'll get into what goes on in our context.
Okay. That's such a great question. I talked with a leader yesterday about this, and I'm going to get back to your like, what did I learn in the
Yeah.
missions thing? I was just casting a vision for him yesterday about like, what is he doing after he finishes this investment of discipleship with the 8 guys he's had for an entire year? And he's like, well, I don't want to keep hanging out with them. I want them to multiply, and I'm going to lead another group and disciple guys. Which I was like, that's a great problem to have. It's only a problem because I would love for him to lead another group and disciple more men, but he was missing this other new great value and opportunity of becoming a mentor of disciple makers
Mm,
and seeing himself as a mentor, not just for them, but then their next layer of leaders and then stage of leaders to that fourth generation, like you said. And
mm,
and it got into a conversation about mentorship. And the reality was he's just never been mentored. He's gone to church and then been invited to be a small group leader and maybe had a little bit of mentorship and capacities in that way. And he's never in his world heard anyone talk about actually mentoring disciple makers or mentoring people into generations deep.
mm,
It was like, he was like, what are you talking about? Where do I even learn about this?
mm,
So it was like a foreign language for someone.
mm.
And so why do we not see disciples become disciple makers? Is I think it's a lot has to do with church model
Yeah.
and how we practice church and mindset around church. So back to then, like, what did we do in Central America? How did that inform that? In Central America, we did pioneer missions. It started off with indigenous people up in the mountains of Mexico. They spoke Nahuatl as their second language.
Mm,
And we would hike village to village, looking for villages that had either no established churches or no believers. And we would go door to door and ask if we could share about Jesus. We'd share the gospel. And sometimes that would be being, the door shut, rejected, threatened.
mm,
Sometimes it was like, yeah, we want to learn more. And other times someone would like give their life to Jesus on the spot. So when someone was interested, open, a seeker, wanted to learn more, or when someone gave their life to Jesus, then all of a sudden we'd return to that village every week.
mm,
And we would do house visits and explain what it meant to follow Jesus and who Jesus is. And we would be bringing, in the context where I arrived, like I was mentored by someone in doing this that was a pioneer missionary. And he already had some people that he had raised up as national leaders and was still raising up. And so like they would be with us. And we would just continue to have them also help lead the conversation, help have them try to
mm,
teach, have them share their testimony, have them share the gospel, continue to give them room to actually just do what we do and work ourselves out of a job
mm.
and mentor and coach them while we did this.
Okay.
And we had a lot more capacity to do this because we were fully supported missionaries doing this every day. But these guys that were doing it with us as often as they could, they were farmers. And so when they were with us, they were choosing not to farm, to be with us, hiking to a village to do this. And so we just brought them along. They watched us. And if you're familiar with like D square language, like they watched us do it. And then we began to have them help us do it. They began to do it. We'd coach them. And then we just began to celebrate them doing it. And then while that's happening, we're actually doing the work of reaching unchurched people and then doing the house visits, discipling them. They're discipling them with us. And then oftentimes we inevitably by us continuing to go through that community door to door or by discipling these people and people would then come or we'd invite people to join us or they'd be like, hey, couldn't you share this with my cousin? What would end up happening in the ideal scenario that was really cool to see would be, next thing you know, you have 3 to 5 families in a village. You're doing all these house visits and you get to the point where you can't keep up with the house visits. That then, culminates into the day where it's like, let's talk to a family that has a nice big patio in the front of the house and let's have everybody meet at that house. And we're going to do a service, is what we'd call it. And we did more of like the traditional service, like we do worship outside. Like I couldn't sing, still can't. Like whatever it would look like, we do prayer, we do worship, and then we would do a teaching on a passage of the Bible on how to follow Jesus and who Jesus is. And so Yeah, and then we would just continue to do this whole discipling them and looking for people we felt like God was raising up in the leaders and having them then learn how to pray and learn how to share the gospel. And it usually started with someone who was brand new, like having them go with us on house visits, having them learn how to share the gospel. And it just continues to replicate until you have these national leaders who then are actually doing everything that we do and they can do it on their own.
Mm.
I didn't know about like DBS, DMM stuff. If people are familiar with that language, disciple making movements, discovery Bible study.
Yeah.
I just knew what I'd come into back in like 2010 and because it was being done and was taught how to do it. And so I think that then probably informed my like, wow, this is church planting and this is disciple making. And when we would talk to pastors in the States or I'd listen to conversations with pastors and our director at that time, there was this clear disconnect where it was all about the Sunday morning service. And they were like, we don't know how to even begin to do what you do
Mm.
in the States because they felt like it had to be kind of the like go door to door house visits. And so it just seemed like there was this
Mm.
huge chasm between what we did in church planting and disciple making and discipleship and then what the Western church does,
Yeah.
for growing, thriving kind of arc model churches. And I at that time was really young, just was clueless. I'm like, okay, well, I don't know. I guess we just do it differently.
Mm.
So that was probably that first stage.